Hello and welcome. In today's lesson, we're going to learn about color, color theory, and color mixing using watercolor paint. So far in our watercolor unit, we have learned about different watercolor painting techniques, and we've actually gone ahead and applied those techniques to 3 little paintings together. Up next in our unit, you are going to have complete control over your content and your subject in your painting. But before we get there, it's important for us to take a minute and to learn more about color and how to mix all of the colors of the rainbow. That way, when you are painting your choice, you know what to do. For this lesson, you will need your watercolor paints and your brush. You will need your water, of course, your circular palette, a piece of paper towel, but you will also need a pencil and this worksheet, which you can find in your kit. Please go ahead and pause this video and set yourself up so you can paint along with me. But if you haven't yet done the other lessons, please pause this, go back and complete those, and then join me back here. All right. So before we start painting, before we get pigment and water all over here, I do want to take some time to take some notes with you about color theory in pencil and fill in this content over here. To remind you, this content is not new to you. This is something that you've been talking about since kindergarten in art class. I'm just here to remind you of this content and the relationships between color, and then give you the vocabulary that I'm going to expect that you use. So the first thing you're going to want to do is to go ahead and get your name and period up top. And then we're going to start right here with our primary colors. Please go ahead and put a star next to that. Our primary colors are the first tier of colors in our color wheel. And they are going to be red, yellow, and blue. So go ahead and write that in. And then I want you to find them in this color wheel and put a little star next to them. So I'm going to find red and put a little star. That's one of my first primaries. Another primary I have is over here, yellow. And then the last primary here over here is my blue. So find all 3 and put a little star. Next up, we have our secondary colors. Let's put like a little swirly next to it or something. I don't know. You can pick a symbol. And I'm going to write second. They are our secondary colors. They come next. And they are orange, green, and purple, or you can say violet. All right, so I want you to find those on your color wheel as well. Put that same symbol I did, like a little swirl. I'm going to find orange, which is right here. Put a little swirly. Green over here. Put a little swirl. And purple or violet right over here. Now, how do I make my secondary colors? There's a question right here. Well, please notice they're in the middle, right, of each primary pair. So blue and yellow make green right here. Yellow and red make orange. And red and blue make violet. So how do you make secondary colors? Well, you mix 2 primaries together. You mix 2 primary colors together. All right, so if we take a look at our watercolors over here, we are only going to be using the primary colors. We're only using red, yellow, and blue here. We are not going to use the orange, green, violet, brown, or black, because those we are going to mix in terms of our secondaries there. All right, so again, we are only going to be using our primary colors in our watercolor palette. We're only using red, yellow, and blue today. Now, before we pick up that paintbrush, I do want to point out these other colors here, and those are our tertiary colors. We have our primaries, or our first level, our secondaries, our second level by mixing our 2 primaries together, whoops, from here to here, right? But in between each primary and secondary, we have another color, and those are our tertiary colors. So I'm gonna write third above them. I would encourage you to do the same. And if you notice, all of those colors are double named, right? They have two names to them. This one here is red orange, and it comes between the red and the orange. Down here we have orange yellow, and that comes between the yellow and the orange. If we come around, yellow green, blue violet, and red violet. Now I want you to notice in all of those cases, which name comes first, the primary or the secondary name? Red orange, yellow green, blue violet, red violet. The name that comes first is always the primary first, right? It's easy to remember. It's hard to remember when you say them, but you'll get used to it. So this one here is red orange. It's never going to be orange red, okay? All right, let's go ahead and get started painting. So I'm gonna move this around a little bit, pull my water back into frame, and well, I don't need that palette just yet because we're gonna go ahead and do our, hold on, I'm gonna get my brush. We're gonna go ahead and do our primaries first, okay? Now the first one I'm gonna use here is gonna be my yellow because I need to clean that up, and it's the brightest color and it can get the dirtiest the quickest. So I wanna lay that in first. But the very first thing I need to do is to go ahead and activate my brush. Give it a minute to really saturate all those hairs. And then my yellow here has a little bit of green in it. Can you see that? So I'm gonna move this around. I'm gonna try and clean out that green. Maybe I'll put it over there. Grab some more water and clean that up a little bit. I want this to be pure yellow. And again, that's the hardest one to keep nice and clean. So I have my yellow activated. And then I'm gonna find my yellow here first, and I'm gonna paint that in. I'm gonna go straight from my palette of color over here to my piece of paper. Now this paper is printer or computer paper, people say, and it's not going to absorb the water or the color very well. It's not drawing paper, it's not watercolor paper, so just be mindful, try not to add too much water to the piece of paper, it won't react well. Once I have my color here, I'm gonna do the same thing in the space on the color wheel down here. So I'm gonna fill that up, trying to be as neat as I can. For this, I am gonna grade you, making sure that you have all the colors here and that they are mixed up correctly. If it gets a little crazy, it's okay. I'm not gonna go crazy on craftsmanship here. All right, my yellow is there. I'm gonna wash that out. Actually, before I do that, I'm gonna grab that color again. And I know we didn't talk about this just yet, but right down here, let me see, right here, we have a space for warm and cool colors. Yellow is one of our warm colors, so I'm gonna drop that in down here as well. And we'll talk more about that once we finish our color wheel. All right, so I put this yellow in 3 spots for our primary color here, on the color wheel itself, as well as down here in our warm section. All right, let's do our next primary color, which is going to be, I'm gonna choose red. I'm gonna clean out my brush. I'm gonna activate my red over here. And the first thing I'm gonna do is to come over into my primary section, drop in that color. If yours is looking a little pink because you have a lot of water, that's okay. Just make sure that it is pure red from your palette. I'm gonna paint it here as well. And red is also a warm color, so I'm gonna paint that down here. Again, I'm grading you on if you have your colors all in the right spots, not how beautiful this looks, but be mindful. Do you see how this is really wet over here? How do we soak up some of that water? I'm gonna clean out my brush. I'm gonna dry my brush off on my paper towel, And I'm gonna use this as like a little bit of a vacuum. Do I have to do this? No, but I don't want it to go nuts all over. Okay, our last primary color is blue. Going to activate my blue. I don't think you can see that. Activating my blue here, right? And then I'm going to drop it in there. In the primary section, find it on my color wheel. It is right here. Make sure you're using enough water. And then blue, it is a primary, but it is actually, let me pull this up, a cool color. So I'm gonna come down here and I am going to paint that in. Now again, I know we haven't really talked about our warm and cool colors yet, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. For now, we're just gonna drop them in. Okay, so those are our 3 primary colors. I'm gonna wash out my brush, and now I'm gonna bring over my circular palette because I'm getting ready to mix up my secondary colors. So to remind you, your secondary colors are made by mixing 2 of your primaries together, and they're going to be located between them on the color wheel. So here we have, hold on, here we have orange, but by mixing red and yellow. Then we have violet or purple by mixing red and blue. And then down here we have green by mixing blue and yellow. Now, instead of going around and plopping in all of our secondaries, we're actually going to mix up our secondaries and our tertiaries together in one section at a time because they are related to each other. So I'm gonna start with orange. I'm gonna try and mix up an orange, a red orange, and a yellow orange. Now, the biggest question I have is how do you know when it's like the true secondary color? What if it's like more red orange or more yellow orange? How do you tell? Well, a good guide right here is going to be that orange there, but we're not going to use it. We're going to mix our own orange. But then it's sort of like trial and error a little bit. I have a pair of scissors right in front of me, and that is going to be a really good yellow orange color. So it just has more yellow in it versus this one over here. This orange that we create for the red orange is going to have more red in it. All right. So I might keep that handy so I can test that out in just a few minutes. Now I have to rearrange myself because I don't want to go for, like over my piece of paper because what if I drip, right? So I'm going to move this, making sure it's in frame. I'm going to move this over here and I'll have that there, something like that. All right, I'm going to start with orange and I'm going to grab some red first. And I'm gonna go into one of my wells. We know this drill. I'm gonna add some water to it. And then maybe a few more drops because I can use this orange to help me make the other ones. And then I'm gonna make sure my brush is really clean and I'm gonna dip into my yellow. And I'm just gonna go for it. I'm gonna add it there and try and create that perfect orange color. Now this is going to be not as pigmented. I have a lot of water in there. So I'm gonna grab some more red and some more yellow and try and create that perfect middle orange there. I think I'm gonna add a little bit more yellow. Something like that. If you wanted to take a piece of scrap paper that you have and test it out, you're more than welcome to. But if you're confident with it, this might be a little bit more watery on this piece of paper. I think that's gonna make a good orange. I'm gonna plop that down right there. Both in my color wheel itself. Yeah, this is really watery. And then also over here. So the key here for my next couple ones, I'm gonna make sure I don't add so much water, right? Next up, I'm gonna try and make a red orange and a yellow orange. So I might start over because that was a lot of water. And I'm gonna have my red, and this time I'm only gonna add like the tiniest bit of yellow. I just want that color to change a little bit. I don't want it to become that same color orange. So that feels like more of a red orange, and I'm gonna put that in here. Do you see the difference? Not quite. If you don't, maybe you add one more red. You should see a clear difference between those two. When those dry, we'll go over it. So I don't want to disturb these colors. I'm gonna just turn my circular palette around to get some more access. Maybe I'll add a second coat to that once it dries up a little bit better. Do you see how poorly this paper is reacting to the water and to the pigment? That's why we use watercolor paper and drawing paper to practice on. All right, let's make our yellow orange. I'm gonna start with my yellow this time. Do you see I'm really not using a lot of water now anymore? And I'm gonna just touch into that red, just the tiniest bit, and tap that in. I just wanna change that color, make like a mustardy color almost, right? Maybe I'll tap a little bit more. There we go. Do you see the difference between these three colors here? Let me put that down. There. That's a nice yellow orange. All right, I'm gonna wash out my brush and I'm gonna dry it and suck up some of that extra pigment there. I'll let that dry, and we'll come back to that a little bit later. Oh, before we move on, I forgot something. I forgot to add my orange to my warm colors. So I'm gonna come over here, I'm gonna grab that orange, and I'm going to put that down here. It's gonna be really light again because it's just too much water I used. And I'm glad I did that so you can see the difference water makes here. Orange is the last of our three warm colors. Now, yellow orange and red orange are also warm colors, right? But those are the three spots we have here. So when this dries, we can add in the names red, yellow, and orange there. All right, so let's move on to our next section. I think I'm gonna come up here and do our violet, blue violet, and red light violet. Excuse me, I'm gonna turn this around. And remember, we're only gonna use blue and red on our palette. We're not gonna use that violet that's already in there. I want you to mix your own. Don't take that shortcut. All right, I'm gonna start with red. I'm gonna put it in its own well. You can see I added some water. I'm gonna rinse my brush. I'm gonna come over to my blue, grab some of that, and I'm just gonna tap in and mix. And then I'm going to sort of assess that color. I want to see if that color is like a pure violet or if it's more red violet or more blue violet. So I put that down, and I might save that for a minute because I'm a little unsure. So instead I'm going to try in this well to make a red violet first. So it's going to be red and blue, just this time much more red and just a tiny bit of blue. So I'm gonna tap into that blue, put that in there and see if I can, that's nice. That's more of a purpley pink color, right, that we call red violet. So that's gonna be my red violet. I think that's my violet or my purple. And then the one next to it is gonna be blue violet. So let's try and do that just for safety, right? This is a different kind of approach than I did before. This time I'm gonna start with blue, plop that blue pigment in here, wash the brush, grab just a touch of red and drop it in there. Yeah, and do you see how this one is still sort of purpley, but it's much more blue? That's the relationship that you're looking for here. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and put those in here. Remember where they are. I'm gonna grab my red violet first, drop that in. Okay, then I have my violet here. Remember, I was unsure about that, but I think it works well. Drop that in here. Try not to let them touch. I know that's really hard, but you don't want them to bleed together. And then my blue violet right over here. Again, try not to let them touch. I'm trying to fill up the whole space, but I'm really not touching those edges there. That's very difficult. Now, before we move on to green, let's take that middle tone and put it right here for our violet or purple and our secondary color. And then what's your guess? Is it warm or cool? Well, that's a silly question because we've already filled up all the warm sections, right? So it must be a cool color. Grab that same one and drop that in there. All right, you can see this isn't looking beautiful. It's drying, but it's sort of looking a little muddy, and that's because of our paper, right? Again, this is that printer paper, and it's just not gonna absorb the pigment and or the color in the correct way, quote unquote, that we've come to know and love from watercolor. All right, here's our last section, our green. How do you make green? Well, you mix our two primary colors here, blue and yellow, make green. How do you make yellow green? You're gonna add more yellow, less blue. How do you make your blue green? You're gonna add more blue and less yellow. Now, if we look at our watercolor palette here, I want to just note something for you. Do you see how the green is between the yellow and the blue, right? So this is in quote unquote rainbow order, and that's because red and yellow make orange, yellow and blue make green. And I know violet's over here, we put it on the end, but like this could wrap around, that's where we get the color wheel, right? Forget about this, the black and the brown down here. We don't need those in our color wheel just yet. We'll talk about how to make those colors in a little bit. All right, let's move into green. And I was almost gonna dip right into this green in our palette here, but again, I'll start with blue. I'm gonna put it there. Oh, there's like a fuzzy in there. And then wash my brush out really well because I'm gonna go to that yellow. Tap into the yellow and add it to the blue. And I have a green color. What's your guess though? Is that gonna be green, blue green, or yellow green? Green, blue green, or yellow green? That I think is a true green. Does that match? Not really, right? Isn't that more of a blue green color? All right, let me see if I can make this a little bit more quote unquote true green. I'm gonna do that same thing. I'm gonna grab the blue over here, wash my brush, and I'm gonna add a little bit more yellow this time. That's more like a lime green, we call that, right? That's gonna be our yellow green. So somewhere between this one and that one, we have our true green. So let me try that. Let me try one more time. It's just trial and error, isn't it? So blue, wash out my brush. I'm gonna add just one bit of yellow at a time. It's feeling better, maybe a little bit, maybe not that much. A little bit more. That feels better. That's like a mid-tone between this darker green and a lighter green. I'm giving like half quotes because it's not darker or lighter. It's not really value, it's pigmentation, right? That'll do for us. All right, so I'm gonna use this green here. I didn't make too much. I wish I made more. Put that in the middle. I might make some more. I'm gonna do that because I need it again twice. Blue. One thing of yellow at a time. There we go, that's better. I might have to let that dry. While I'm at it, I'm gonna drop it in here. And it's our last cool color all the way down here. It's convenient, isn't it? Okay. I'm gonna let that dry and add another layer in just a few seconds. And I already have my colors, so I'm gonna drop in yellow, green. Remember, don't let it touch. Wash my brush, and my blue, green. I almost went to the wrong one. And don't let it touch. Now, you know if they touch, they're gonna just like bleed into each other and do the wet on wet mixing, right? All right, and that is our completed color wheel, isn't it? So we talked about primary colors, secondary colors, and our tertiary colors, which we just created. And we went around in sections to create them all together. As they dry, they might look more or less vibrant, depending on your colors, depending on the paper, well, the paper itself, right? So if you take a look, this is feeling much more dry. I'm going to understand where your colors are at. I am looking for a difference between each of them. So just be mindful that they do look different even when they are dry. All right, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope this makes sense to you. I'm looking forward to seeing your color wheels. And in our next lesson, we are going to talk about this section down here, complementary colors, which is really fun. All right, until next time.